88 to 91 FM.
This is I Will Not Let You Go, the Bohemian Rhapsody story.
BBC Radio 2.
It was originally recorded and broadcast in November 2005 and contained date-specific references, including mention of that year's Children in Need event.
BBC Radio 2.
Once upon a time, there was a song that went like this.
Is this the real life?
A little while later, it went like this. And then it went like this.
I see a little silhouette of a man. Scaramouche, will you do the fandango?
And then it goes like this. But that was 30 years ago. Today, it goes like this.
Is this the real life, or is this just temporary?
Like this.
Mama, I've just killed a man. Put a gun against his head. Pulled my trigger, now he's dead.
Like this. And sometimes even like this. I'm Steve Wright, and this is I Will Not Let You Go, the Bohemian Rhapsody story. Amazingly, Bohemian Rhapsody is now 30 years old. The song, recently voted the #1 single of all time, hit the charts on the 8th of November 1975, and 30 years ago this week, ascended gracefully to the #1 spot. When Freddie Mercury died in 1991, Bohemian Rhapsody was the song that people bought to remember him by, and it went to #1 again, the first single ever to perform that feat. Today, it's a song that's heard on the radio somewhere in the world every hour of every day, and it's in the charts again, both in its original version and a new live rendition that features ex-Free singer Paul Rodgers alongside Freddie's vocal. To some, Bohemian Rhapsody is the greatest record ever made, a classic piece of adventurous, entertaining rock music. To others, it's an overblown muddle with a comedy middle eight and a general air of portentousness. Nobody knows what it's about, but everyone knows it, and it made Freddie Mercury and Queen one of the biggest acts in the world.
She keeps a Moet Chandon in a pretty cabinet. Anthony cake, she says, just like Marie Antoinette. Building a remedy for Khrushchev and Kennedy. At any time, an invitation you can't decline. Caviar and cigarettes, well versed in etiquette, extraordinarily nice. She's a killer queen, gunpowder gelatine, dynamite with a laser beam.
It was all very different back in 1975, as rock journalist Paul Lester explains.
I think anybody that was paying attention, they probably could tell that punk was around the corner. 1975 was a bit of a doldrums year for rock music, and I don't think anybody would have guessed that Queen were going to be the saviours of rock music, or that they had would have a second wind in the 80s. Certainly nobody would have predicted that 10 years thereafter, 10 years into the future, they would be the band that would dominate the greatest rock gig of all time and play to a crowd of an audience of 1 billion. Everything seemed to be weighted against them. Critically, certainly, the NME used to regularly take the piss out of Queen and Freddie Mercury in particular. It was open season on Freddie Mercury in 1975, and they really didn't take them very seriously at all.
Queen's Brian May.
It was sort of life or death. I mean, it was definitely sink or swim. If that album hadn't done what it did, that would have been the end of the band without any question.
It's easy to gamble when you've got nothing to lose.
That was Roger Taylor. Here's Freddie Mercury.
I think A Night at the Opera was a good title for that album, I feel, because it had operatic content. And while we were doing that album, we felt we've got to come up with a title that means something, you know.
I think we always had this thing about the song coming first. You know, if the song would come in, we'd say, well, that doesn't need to be forced into a standard rock and roll mode. We should do what the song demands. So we would bring in all kinds of instruments and play around with them. And sometimes the textures got very mixed up, and it was very, very us, I suppose. Yeah, we felt very free because we had an audience who understood us and didn't want us to make the same kind of sound every time.
I suppose that was our idea of making it not just typical rock and roll, you know. And I think in our own minds, we were always doing it with a slight tongue-in-cheek, you know. It was always not completely serious, but just interesting. We thought more interesting to slide those references in a sort of humorous way to us. I suppose that wasn't an obvious thing to other people listening. But for us, it made it one step away from your average hard rock album.
What happened with A Night at the Opera was that we just suddenly realised what kind of paintbrushes we had in our hands. I guess suddenly isn't the right word. It was a gradual realisation, because even on Queen 2, you can hear a lot of the beginnings of those kind of Baroque kind of expeditions. You know, there's a lot of Bohemian Rhapsody starting to take shape there from Freddie and from all of us, really. We loved the studio. We just found it an endless, limitless canvas. And we were in a very wonderful time where all these new bits of equipment were coming in. The Beatles had only just kind of got into multi-tracking, really, by hooking up machines to run together. And we had access to probably the first 16 tracks, the first 24 tracks. So we had great tools in our hands, and we were just ready to go for it. And then as soon as you got the toy in your hand and you figured out how to use it, then you just let your imagination run riot. So we were in a great place, and we just loved it. We had a great time.
Queen archivist Greg Brooks.
When I'm privileged enough to be in the room when they're playing through multi-tracks, every single track is strong, whether it's just a bit of bass or a bit of Brian's guitar or a vocal from Freddie or a high harmony from Roger. It's exceptional. absolutely exceptional. Every track of the 24-track tape stands up on its own.
I would say we wanted to do the harmonic things, but better, hopefully, vocally that Yes were doing, but combine that with the wonderful, brutal, heavy influence of what Led Zeppelin were doing. And that was at the time we started. Obviously we changed as we went along, but I would say that more than anything else we wanted to combine those two sort of genres. We just actually started the song which had a mock operetta in the middle, and by sheer coincidence we sat down that night very late, maybe 2 in the morning, and watched video machines were just invented then, of the Marx Brothers, A Night at the Opera. Freddie and I turned round to each other, remember, and said, "Cool, that's a good title." And because we'd just been doing this mock operetta, and then we said, I think, to everybody else, and everybody went, yeah.
It was a spontaneous decision, and then we looked into it, and there were a lot of parallels. I mean, the Marx Brothers were they took a lot of care in their work, and Roger's got a few books on it, and he sort of looked it up, and it's quite fascinating.
Freddie was very much a perfectionist, and that's what always comes across from all the stuff I've heard from those tapes. Not just him, every band member and the producer and the engineer are all striving for perfection. But certainly on the Night at the Opera material, it's so evident that they really will not settle for one note that's slightly wrong. They'll go again and again and again for a 6-minute take or a 3-minute take, and at the end you'll hear Freddie or Brian say, "I played the wrong note on the second verse," or I did this on the final chorus, or whatever, and they'll go again.
A Night at the Opera, it was a very big album in England, and sort of everywhere, really, I think, and it consolidated what we'd done in America. We just started, really, with the third album. So it was the sort of clincher, in a way, in the early stage of our career.
Now the earth will shake and two will break. The earth will shake and two will break. Circle around.
But literally, the crowning glory of A Night at the Opera was the penultimate track. Here's Freddie's mum, Jo Bulsara.
I remember my Freddie bringing over a demo tape, and he said, "Mum, this is the new single that I would like to bring out." And he played, and he left it with me. And I kept on playing, and I kept on playing, and it just got, grew on me, and I loved it at that time. And it was a brilliant song.
I was a teenager when that song came out, and only in subsequent years did I appreciate the extent of the musicianship in it. And a lot of people probably saw that at the time, and a lot of people just saw the unusualness of it and the eccentricities of it, and not much more. But yeah, I think generally it was received well, and everybody marvelled at it, and as I say, that's rightly so.
I do remember it very, very well in the autumn of 1975, because I'd just left home. I was 16. I hadn't left under a cloud in any way, but I'd gone away to college, and I was actually living in a bedsit, which was pretty depressing. And Bohemian Rhapsody was number one for 9 weeks, I think. It was number one pretty much the entire first term I was away from home. So it was the soundtrack of an exciting but slightly lonely and melancholic period. So it's funny how I have a very big affinity for it. I loved it at the time. And it occasionally, when I'm in the theatre now, 4 years onward we will rock here, I do occasionally, I wonder what I might have thought if I'd known, hearing it when I was 16 and, desperately hoping to have a career in theatre, that one day I'd be connected with that song in this way.
Freddie came in one day. He had it written completely down on the backs of telephone books. He had every harmony written, and I think he had the entire thing mapped out mentally. He knew exactly how he wanted it to sound. So that is one song really but it belonged to him. Half the time we didn't really quite know what the totality of what it was going to be when we were playing it. So I mean, that was amazing. There were enormous harmonies in there, and he really had most of it in his head beforehand.
He came in a lot of the time, Freddie, with little notes written out. And by notes, I mean he would write the names of all the notes in patterns if he had the harmonies that he'd worked out on the piano. And he had a structure. He was very into preparation in those days. It changed later on. He was much more instinctive later on. But in those days, he would have everything in his head and on these little pieces of paper. And I was in the control room while the three of them did the backing track for Bohemian Rhapsody, because it would normally be either guitar, bass and drums or piano, bass and drums. So Rhapsody was piano, bass and drums. I was sitting there in the control room with Roy, and they're doing din 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 din, all these little gaps, and it was pretty hard for us to figure out what on earth he had in mind. But he said, "Oh no, this is the operatic bit. This is this bit. This is the big rock bit," you know, and gradually it took shape.
It was quite a mammoth task because it was basically done in three definite sections and just pieced together. And each one required a lot of concentration. The opera section in the middle was the most taxing, I think, because we wanted to recreate a sort of huge operatic sort of harmony section between just the three of us, and that involves a lot of multi-tracking and things. And I think between the three of us, we sort of we recreated a sort of 160 to 200 piece choir effect. Between just the three of us, as Brian, Roger and myself.
There's a tremendous range of harmonies, yes. And it involves doing it again and again and again and again to make it sound bigger and bigger and bigger.
Each little part,
each little bit has to be done that many times. You have to learn all the very different parts. I think some of them were, how many part harmonies?
Because I mean, like there was a section of no, 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 and we had to sort of do that and sort of different escalating things, and we just sat there going no, 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 about, I don't know, 150 times.
Going out of our minds.
The producer of Bohemian Rhapsody was Roy Thomas Baker, here reunited with the original master recording.
The original mix, when we were doing it manually, it was a case of I was controlling the drums, bass, piano, guitars. Then about here was Freddie, and he had control over the vocals. He would be switching vocals on and off and doing it that way. Let me push up the... So this is the piano. This is the piano solo. This was actually done live by Freddie as we were doing the track. So when you listen to the piano tracks, you can just about hear some of the drums in the background because it was all done in one room. It wasn't done in a separate room. We put covers over the piano to try and deaden down the sound of the other instruments. But the bass, you can hear the bass in the background, you can hear the drums. The drums, then, this is the drums on their own. Okay, now Scaramouche, will you do the fandango? Now, John, who was on bass, we spread the bass over 3 channels. And we had the drums and bass together and piano. This is the solo from Brian. That was also recorded on one track. It wasn't done on multiple tracks. It was just one track.
I wanted to make a little tune that would be a sort of counterpart to the main melody. I didn't want to just play the melody.
It could all have been so different, couldn't it?
So I can remember singing it to Freddie and him going, "Oh yeah, that'll be good." And I think certainly my best stuff is born that way. It's much better for me to hear it in my head and then try and play it than sit down with the guitar and sort of let the fingers do it. The fingers tend to be a little predictable unless they're being led by the brain.
We were sort of getting off on the on how far can we take this, you know, let's and how big can we make those harmonies, and let's make a wall of sound that really is a wall, and it starts down there and it goes right up, you know, and so really we were sort of quite interested in seeing how far you could actually go before it became totally ridiculous, or the limits of the technology stopped you.
But I mean, as we did so many overdubs, I mean, on 16 track, it was like we just kept piling it on and on, and it was like that's what Roger means when the tape went transparent, because it just couldn't take anymore. I think it snapped in about 2 places.
It'd gone over the head so many times, and overdubbing, the oxide had worn off.
So it was a lot of work, and it was really tedious, some of it, but then it would be very nice after sort of 3 hours singing. You could just listen to a little section. That would be, you know, nice. Is it getting bigger? No, it's not getting any bigger. We better stop there then, you know.
Okay, this is the little Galileo section, which is between high vocal from Roger and low from Freddie. So this is Roger's track first.
Galileo Figaro! We used to joke about the pliers under the frock, you know. We were lucky. We had a very good chemistry when it came to vocals, and I mean, Brian could get down quite low. Fred had this incredibly powerful voice through the middle, and I was very good at all the high stuff. So we all sang every part.
Also, now you're about to hear the opera section, only the vocals, no backing track at all.
Easy come, easy go, will you let me go? Bismillah! No, we will not let you go. Let him go! Bismillah! We will not let you go. Let him go! Bismillah! We will not let you go. Let me go! We'll not let you go. Let me go! We'll not let you go. Let me go! No, 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 no. Oh, mamma mia, mamma mia. Mamma mia, let me go. Beelzebub has a devil put aside for me, for me, for me. You can stone me and spit in my eye. So you think you can love me and leave me to die? Oh, baby, can't do this to me, baby. Just gotta get out, just gotta get right out of here.
John volunteered not to sing because I don't think he liked his own vocals. He wasn't going to get an argument from any of us, including the band. So basically it was the three guys. It was Freddie, Brian and Roger who would sing.
Somebody said this was something like Cecil B. DeMille meets Walt Disney or something, which is more to the point than, say, the Beach Boys.
This is going to be a rare scenario now. We're going to be playing the instrumentation of the opera section without the opera. Just purely the track, and the track consists of drums, bass, Freddie on piano, and Roger's overdub of timpani. There's a few stumbled notes here, which obviously weren't supposed to be heard. Now you might hear them. The thing about Freddie was it was far more organised than he lets on. He'd have little scraps of paper everywhere with little things and little Galileos here. So it was all written down on, you know, just on paper and pencil. It seemed like it was a bit haphazard, but it wasn't. Those times it wasn't easy. It was very, very hard. But we didn't mind because we knew we were setting certain trends that then eventually technology caught up with us, so that was pretty good.
I think we knew it was special. We didn't think it would be, you don't anticipate it would be as popular as it turned out to be, but we did think it was special and it was worth spending literally weeks on recording it. So we had an inkling that there was something special there, yeah.
Nobody wanted Bohemian Rhapsody to sing, really. Everyone said no one would play it because it was too long and all that stuff.
Nobody except us wanted it.
But this is not to say that we're always right, because we're not.
Well, we're not always right. We've been wrong.
Choice of the single is a very difficult thing. I mean, there's no surefire hit, It's just, there's no such thing. And would say something like Bohemian Rhapsody, it was a big risk and it worked. Because I think with a song like that, it was either going to be a huge success or a terrific flop. And, it was...
But it's been no bed of roses. No pleasure cruise.
Music critic Paul Lester.
This is what happens if you leave market research and focus teams well alone. Because if you'd have played them Bohemian Rhapsody, if you'd taken a focus team to Bohemian Rhapsody and let them have their way with it, it would have been reduced to 3 minutes. Everything we know and love about that song would have been taken away, would have been stripped down. It would have become a 3-minute ditty with barely any of the elements that are recognisable, integral to Bohemian Rhapsody.
Fiona Bruce.
When I first heard Bohemian Rhapsody, I thought, God, it's so long. But I also thought it was brilliant.
Here's Freddie's sister, Kashmira Cook.
I was quite surprised at the length of the song, which I think everybody was worried about. But I was intrigued, and basically I just wanted it to go well for Freddie and not have a major flop.
At 6 minutes long, Bohemian Rhapsody was certainly a risky choice for a single, and a certain amount of subterfuge had to be employed to get it released. Here's Freddie's close friend, journalist David Wigg.
And I'm not surprised that Freddie insisted that the radio stations play the full record. They wanted him to cut it because it wasn't short enough, but he refused to.
Is this the real life?
Slade's Noddy Holder.
I remember Brian bought a rough mix of Bohemian Rhapsody round to my flat in London, and he says this is going to be the new single, and he put it on, and I think as everybody else he must have played it to said to, you ain't got a hope in hell of getting this played on radio, 7 minute long.
John Reid.
I had an acetate of it, and I played to a couple of people. One of them was Elton John. And I played it to him, and he said, "Are you mad?"
We invited Kenny Everett along, and he listened to it, and he said, "That's wonderful, that's great. They should have a new position. It shouldn't be one, it should be a position above that, like half. And that's where it should be half." And we gave him a copy, and we said, "Whatever you do, you can't play this." And he said, "Okay, I won't play it," and winked. And then that following weekend, he played it on the Radio Capital.
As if making a groundbreaking record wasn't enough, Queen went one step further and invented the modern pop video. But they did it for very practical reasons. Here's Brian May.
I have to say the main reason we made it was because we didn't want to go on top of the pops. Not because we didn't like the programme, but because we didn't feel comfortable standing around and sort of miming in a sort of rather unfamiliar situation. We wanted to make our own vehicle. Plus, we knew we were going to be on tour, and if it was in the charts, we wouldn't be able to go in there anyway.
We were actually signed to a company called Trillion that was an independent outside broadcast unit for sports for ITV. And we suddenly thought, well, why don't we use one of their trucks, get their cameras into Elstree, where we were rehearsing, and we'll film it. We'll put it on this videotape stuff.
Cameraman Barry Dodd.
In those days, the technology was good, but a lot of the effects we had to create ourselves. And we used a thing like this. This is similar to the one we use. It's a multi-facet lens, and we held this in front of the camera to achieve the multiple images that we see.
Thunderbolt and lightning, very, very frightening me.
And in those days, that was special effects, sort of laughable now.
I remember distinctly seeing the first rough cut that Bruce brought to show us when we were on tour, sitting around this little telly watching, and we all laughed very heartily, saying, it's really funny, it's really great, it's very slightly kitsch, but it seems to bring the song to life.
Video director Bruce Gowers.
We finished shooting around 10:30. That was the choral element and the rock and roll element. And then we all hightailed down to the pub. I think when we came to edit, there was a rush to get it completed because we were trying to get it aired, I think, the week of shooting on Top of the Pops. So we cut it in maybe 4 hours, 5 hours, something like that. And as soon as it was done, it was shipped up to the Beat.
It is Queen and that fantastic number called Bohemian Rhapsody.
Well, it was completely a different thing for us to watch, because in those days they used to perform live on Top of the Pops when this video came up, and everybody were excited about it, and the way he sang, especially his costumes.
I remember when Freddie came to visit us for a few days and stayed over, and we thought we'd take him to York for the day. All we saw was a crowd of these school children coming faster and faster towards us, and in the end we had to run the opposite way. And then I realised, my God, he's being recognised by just everybody.
I went to the shops, I was very excited, and they were all around the shops, with Bohemian Rhapsody, Queen. And I got one, and I was so pleased with myself that I'm buying something of my son's first #1 record.
Goodbye, everybody.
We were in Southampton playing a concert in our tour, and I remember my mother was there visiting, and I got a phone call in the morning saying you're #1, and I just remember sort of going down to breakfast and going, guess what, Mum, we're #1, and it was great, it was fantastic.
Bohemian Rhapsody was the song that made everybody sit up and listen. If they hadn't, or they'd missed 7 Seas of Ryan, Killer Queen, then this song was not going to be ignored. And I think other people have said it, but whether you like it or whether you dislike it, you couldn't ignore it.
I mean, Queen had a couple of hits in the early 70s. They made a couple of appearances on Top of the Pops, but they hadn't really crossed over yet. They were still seen as maybe an albums band who wanted to become a singles group, a rock band who wanted to be taken more seriously as a pop group, because I think if they were really honest, they probably would have been more comfortable with a pop audience. I don't think they were ever going to be Led Zeppelin. I think they really wanted to be the Beatles.
I'm Steve Wright, and this is I Will Not Let You Go, the Bohemian Rhapsody story.
88 to 91.
Radio 2, 88 to 91 FM. Oh, yeah.
BBC Radio 2.
Everybody knows all the words to Bohemian Rhapsody, but does anybody know what it really means?
Everybody tried to understand it, and I think the more you tried, the more weird it got. And well, you could never, every time you heard it, you always came out with a different understanding of the song. And I think the best thing is not to try and understand it.
Most good rock lyrics are pretty open to interpretation. I mean, some of them are very, very specific, I need somebody to love. But a lot of lyrics, particularly Queen's lyrics, are sort of more obscure. And yes, it's great to be able to decide on your own meaning. And I think Bohemian Rhapsody in particular, because the lyric is so complex and constantly gives the impression of saying something very deep, but you've no idea what it is. Sounds as if Freddie had a real idea going on there, or a lot of ideas, and he knew what he was talking about. And Roger will tell you that, he knows too, but he's not going to tell us, Now, I personally think, my guess is that Freddie found the words intriguing. I'm not sure that he was particularly concerned with any narrative meaning. I think he wanted impact. He wanted to appeal instantly to the senses. And so, Mama just killed a man is a great line. I don't know if he really knows who Mama was or who the man was. And just as Scaramouche, Scaramouche, will you do the fandango, so you think you can love me and leave me behind to die, I think he just came up with a lot of great sets of words, and as I say, you can make them mean whatever you want.
Even Freddie used to say that people has to make their own minds in whichever way they think it. He might think it different, and people would find it different way.
I suppose it's like going to see, I don't know, paintings of an artist, and everybody thinks, oh, they know what the artist was on about in the picture. And you always get a different story out of it.
Playing Scaramouche in We Will Rock You is Hannah Jane Fox.
If you discuss it with Brian or Roger, I mean, you know, I think they say that it's Freddie's secret, it's Freddie's vision. I'm sure they know personally what Freddie, you know, explained the song to me. But there's lots of really interesting stories like that with Queen.
Well, I know what the song means. I don't think it's that, you know, that difficult, you know. I think it's fairly self-explanatory. There's just a bit of nonsense in the middle.
Playing Galileo is Peter Johansson.
The whole legend of the whole song, so many people have been trying to figure out, you know, what it's really about. Because there's always going to be someone, oh, I got the answer, I know what it's about. And, you know, then the song's going to live forever in a way, because no one's really going to figure out what it's about.
Maybe they just had a couple of drinks too many.
Although I think it's a wonderful song and it's quite serious in some ways, it's got a tremendous sense of humour about it, especially in obviously in the central sort of pastiche section, you know, that sort of mock operatic section. I mean, we thought it was hilarious when we were doing it, but great, you know, quite exciting and fun and big but funny, you know.
Because I thought, my God, don't take yourself so seriously.
Yeah.
And the first way to do it is that put on a ridiculous costume and go on the stage and tell them you're so serious. But just have tongue-in-cheek and say it to yourself, as long as you know. Yeah, and then it worked.
We were very full of ourselves, I suppose, and hardly stopping to think about, you know, what the plan was. We were just somehow pushing on, and it all seemed very clear.
There's no plan really. It was just what happened, you know, as it happened.
My God, what did you look like? A lot of my costumes. You see,
and embarrassed by some of them.
Yeah, I'm totally embarrassed.
Yeah.
But I took them so seriously at the time, and I look back on that thing. And I think, oh, you silly girl, I know.
Everybody agrees that Bohemian Rhapsody was one of the songs that meant most to Freddie. But what does it reveal about the man himself? What was Freddie like off stage?
Freddie Mercury has to be one of the most talented and varied songwriters, I'd say. I mean, it was sort of easy to lose sight of that as you went along, as you heard the singles one by one, the albums. But looking back on it, and the variety of what he did, the range of what he did, and the way he sang them, was just fantastic. There's no one to touch him, really.
Freddie invited me around to his flat in Holland Road. And I went round there, and when I went in, the thing that struck me first was that Freddie was listening to the Liza Minnelli Cabaret soundtrack, which at that time we thought, oh, well, this rock group and this music didn't kind of fit. And he showed me the flat, and in the bedroom there was an upright piano with candle arms on it, which was his headboard. And he said that sometimes during the night he would think of something musical and flip it back and play it. He was double jointed and his hands could bend back completely. And I think that's where some of the passages from Bohemian Rhapsody started, playing it backwards.
When Freddie was becoming famous, especially after Bohemian Rhapsody, I would get friends and friends of friends saying, oh, you do look like Freddie. And eventually I got fed up with that and said, no, actually he looks like me. Because I grew up with it, I suppose, it just was natural for me. Most of the time I was getting the reaction when Freddie was becoming famous, especially after Bohemian Rhapsody.
To me, it's quite a normal life, you know, like winning the pools, except I win the pools every day.
My Freddie was always a simple man when he used to come with the family, just an ordinary family man. And that's the way we kept it, and that's the way we all enjoyed it.
Behind the man was a very shy person. He was very suspicious of strangers. He was very insecure about his looks. I mean, he hated his teeth, for example, which were slightly protruded, as you know. And it was a long time before he would actually trust somebody. But once you were in his circle, then he would be the greatest fun and very wickedly funny.
It was like a job. He was going to work on stage, and that would be that. And then when he came off stage, he was himself.
Let them tell you you're boring, you know. Yeah. And it's wonderful. You can say, oh my God, you're boring, you're not saying a thing. I love it now. 2 years ago, somebody said you're boring. I would go, man, I'm having a flat. I've been. Yeah. So now I love it. I think, oh yes, I am boring. I'm sorry, I can't understand you.
Freddie Mercury obviously lapped up the attention. He was energised on a stage, and he reacted brilliantly to audience excitement, and that would push him further in his eagerness to entertain ever bigger audiences, and the effort to entertain them is always 100%.
There were two sides to Freddie Mercury. I mean, there was this great showman who would go out there and just take control of the most enormous audience, of which we saw at Live Aid when really Queen stole the show, and it was mostly through Freddie's majestic performance. Freddie was very conscious of the audience. He really loved the fans. They meant so much to him. He cared an awful lot, and he wanted to make sure that they got value for money.
In the beginning, we thought it was just a passing stage, but afterwards, we thought he was really in it when he was a teenager. That was one of the time I even told him, you should get a proper job. And he said, well, this is what I want to do, and I'll keep on trying till I'm 30. Then I'll know that I'm not successful. But he did a wonderful job.
Freddie Mercury died in 1991, and since then it seems that the song has taken on a life of its own.
16 years later, it's number one again, and here it is. This is Queen and Bohemian Rhapsody at number one.
It sold awful lot around the world. You know, I think as much again as it had done the first time. I suppose I'm not going to tell you I'm surprised.
It's an everlasting, evergreen composition, and you get other bands all around the world wanting to do it. I mean, we just had G4 doing it, which got them lots of points on a recent contest, didn't it? So, I mean, a younger generation are discovering it. I mean, I talk to a lot of students, and they're always asking me about Queen and Bohemian Rhapsody and what was Freddie really like. There's a fascination for them and a tremendous respect. And in a way, I think Freddie is now more regarded, since sadly he died, 14 years ago, than actually at that time.
You know, it's a great track. I'm sure it will have another lease of life in it.
88 to 91 FM. This is I Will Not Let You Go, the Bohemian Rhapsody story.
BBC Radio 2.
There are a multitude of cover versions which range from the sublime to the ridiculous to the downright awful, but some of the nice ones that I think worked really well are from the Braids. This is quite a nice version. Nice groove.
Just killed a man, put a gun against his head, pulled my trigger, now he's dead.
So like I say, you go from something like that to something very silly like Frank Sidebottom's masterpiece.
Is this the real life, or is this just temporary?
And if you think that's bad, I'll play you something from a group called Ricky, Kitty and the Claws. This is, well, you'll hear what it is. Yes, this is Cats. We'll skip on to something from Japan. This is Elaine Page, which is rather nice. This one is a typical example of an orchestral recital. This is the Royal Philharmonic Orchestra. Just one more of the cover versions by a group called Magic Affair. It's a bit different, this. Not everybody's cup of tea, but different. So that's the murky world, if you like, or the diverse world of Bohemian Rhapsody cover versions. As I say, from the sublime to the ridiculous to the awful.
Queen were never able to play Bohemian Rhapsody completely live, but today you can see it on stage every night as the finale to the Queen musical We Will Rock You.
Buddy, you're a boy, make a big noise playing in the street. Gonna be a big man someday. You got mud on your face, you big disgrace, kicking your can all over the place. We will rock you. Sing it, kid. We will rock you.
Here's author Ben Elton.
I think Bohemian Rhapsody was one of the reasons that it was so clear to me that Queen would be wonderful on stage, because their music is all uniquely theatrical. I mean, it's operatic, it's shot through with vast imagery and then wonderful intimacy, and suddenly it explodes again into all sorts of mad stories, and it's full of wit and imagery, and in particular Bohemian Rhapsody, and it's in itself a sort of mini opera, as they say. So it's certainly, the minute you hear it, you think that's got to be on stage, and certainly Brian and Roger were very clear that it should be a part of the show, but they also said, it'll need 35 trained singers. They never ever did it fully themselves on stage. They played bits of it live, but they never did the whole thing because it wasn't possible. They couldn't have the cast, and in those days, simply the constraints of that could be achieved. So it was always going to be a massive budget thing, but we have done it. We do have 35 trained singers, and we do the whole song in its entirety entirely live, both band and singers, and that's quite something, because even Freddie, rest him in peace, they never heard that live on stage because it was never done until We Will Rock You.
I see a little silhouette of a man. Scaramouche, Scaramouche, will you do the fandango? Thunderbolt and lightning, very, very frightening me. Galileo, Galileo, Figaro, I'm just a poor boy, nobody loves me. He's just a poor boy from a poor family, sparing his life from this monstrosity.
It's an impressive spectacle, the Bohemian Rhapsody from the musical. It's always impressive anyway to hear live music, and it is all live. I don't think people realise, actually, a lot of people don't, that they're watching or listening to live performance at the musical. Only at the end is it evident to some people when the musicians come to stage. When I first saw it, I've seen it a few times since, I just expected that they wouldn't do the middle section. I mean, how could they?
Only last week, Bohemian Rhapsody received its most spectacular revival yet, as performed by the BBC Newsreaders for Children in Need.
I see a little silhouette of a man.
Scaramouche, Scaramouche, will you do the fandango? Thunderbolt and lightning, very, very frightening me. Galileo, Galileo, Figaro, Magnifico.
Scaramouching away with the best of them was Fiona Bruce.
Spare him his life from this monstrosity.
Every year, the producer's aim is to end our careers in an ever more decisive way. God, and all those really high notes as well. I don't know what they were thinking of. But it was fantastic fun doing it, I've got to say. I hardly had any rehearsal because I was really busy, so I just had one rehearsal. And the nightmarish part was I turned up one afternoon and the producer said to me, we're just doing that bit with the headshot, so just wear black, it'll be fine. So I turned up in black, did the headshot, and then suddenly this outfit appeared from nowhere with some white helmet that I had to wear and silver boots that came from a mail-order catalogue for transvestites. I kid you not, boots that went up to size 12. And she said, oh, and listen, we're just recording a bit, so I just want you to sing live in this outfit. And so there I was absolutely crippled with self-consciousness doing this bit, the pre-recorded bit. And I'm completely flat, because to be honest, I was so nervous and so gobsmacked by the whole thing, and I had no idea that before I came in to do a light bit of news broadcasting, that I suddenly have to do this.
Just gotta get out, just gotta get right out of here.
30 years on, Bohemian Rhapsody is bigger than it ever was. And would you bet against it being number one again in another 30 years?
Well, can you think of any other song as equally as unusual and different as Bohemian Rhapsody? I can't. Perhaps that's the reason why people still remember it and like it, because it's so different. Nobody else has managed to come near it.
And that just about sums it up. Although, haven't we forgotten just one thing? Oh, yeah.
Is this the real life? Is this just fantasy? Caught in a landslide, no escape from reality. Open your eyes, look up to the skies and see. I'm just a poor boy, I need no sympathy, because I'm easy come, easy go, little high, little low. Any way the wind blows doesn't really matter to me. To me. Mama just killed a man, put a gun against his head, pulled my trigger, now he's dead. Mama, life had just begun, but now I've gone and thrown it all away. Mama, didn't mean to make you cry. If I'm not back again this time tomorrow, carry on, as if nothing really matters. Too late, my time has come, sent shivers down my spine, body's aching all the time. Goodbye, everybody, I've got to go, gotta leave you all behind and face the truth. Mama, I don't wanna die. I sometimes wish I'd never been born at I see a little silhouette of a man. Scaramouche, will you do the fandango? Thunderbolt and lightning, very, very frightening me. Galileo, Figaro, Magnifico. I'm just a poor boy and nobody loves me. He's just a poor boy from a poor family, sparing his life from this monstrosity. Easy come, easy go, will you let me go? Bismillah, no, we will not let you go. Let him go! Bismillah, we will not let you go. Let him go! Bismillah, we will not let you go. Let me go! We'll not let you go. Let me go! We'll not let you go. Let me go! Oh, mamma mia, mamma mia! Mamma mia, let me go. Beelzebub has a devil put aside for me, for me, for me.
You've just heard I Will Not Let You Go, the story of Bohemian Rhapsody. It was originally recorded and broadcast in November 2005 and contained date-specific references, including mention of that year's Children in Need event.
88 to 91.